Tim Walz was fiery at his first solo campaign event as Kamala Harris's running mate. The Minnesota governor defended his military record amid attacks from Republicans who have accused him of stolen valor.
I was proud to make it to Washington. I was a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee and a champion of our men and women in uniform. I'm going to say it again as clearly as I can. I am damn proud of my service to this country. And I firmly believe you should never denigrate another person's service record. To anyone brave enough to put on that uniform for our great country, including my opponent, I just have a few simple words. Thank you for your service and sacrifice.
Walz has been under fire. Trump's campaign advisor, Chris Lasidka, who created the Swift boat attack campaign against one-time presidential candidate John Kerry, has lobbed attacks against Walz's claim of service, including accusing him of quitting the Army National Guard so he wouldn't have to go to Iraq and exaggerating his service record. At the rally, Walz made many appeals to working-class American families, and as we all know, the way to many people's hearts is through their stomachs.
I happen to be the first union member on a presidential ticket since Ronald Reagan. But rest assured, I won't lose my way. Probably should be a few more union members in elected office, President Saunders. We might want to work at that. I think I'm looking at some. So you heard the story. You knew Vice President Harris grew up in a middle-class family, picked up shifts at that McDonald's as a student. I keep asking this to make a contrast here. Can you simply picture Donald Trump working at a McDonald's trying to make a McFlurry or something? He knows us. He couldn't run that damn McFlurry machine if it cost him anything. So
what did you make of Walz's defense of his military record? Was it satisfactory?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think it's possible to defend. I think he did exaggerate his record, that he suggesting, as I've said many times, that he served in combat, that he carried weapons in war, meaning warfare, when he didn't. And I think he made that implication. I also think it's pretty clear that he got out of his unit just before it was going to be deployed to Iraq, and conservatives are, making a lot about this. I think it's fair to criticize him over it because that was the implication he put out there, and the right is going to continue to hammer him on this, whether it's the most important issue ever. No, what I really don't like about him is his big government liberal policies and the utter tyranny he presided over in his state during COVID, the appalling business climate he created in Minnesota, and so many other things. I find him thoroughly unlikable and frankly terrifying, and I find him way more dangerous than Kamala Harris, but it's up to voters to decide.
Yeah, I was in elementary school when John Kerry was running. I don't remember the Swift boat thing, but I heard it was bad.
It was bad.
And despite the claims being debunked, it still hurt his campaign. Like, Walz was in service for 24 years before he ended up retiring. He was 41 years old. And he decided that, he was going to retire before they got their deployment orders. He filed to run for Congress before they even knew that they would be considered as a unit to deploy to Iraq, and they said it would happen over the next 2 years. He said, I'm willing to serve our country, whether it's in Washington, D.C. or it's in Iraq. He said many times that he deployed during the war in Afghanistan in support of the war, which is very precise language. And so, I think even though there's not a lot of merit to the attack against him, we know from John Kerry's campaign that actually doesn't matter for it to hurt his candidacy. I think it would matter more if he was top of the ticket than if he was vice president, and if he said this more times than just this once. Where he said, I carried weapons in war.
Yeah. We've argued about this a number of times and will continue to do so, but he has really been a focus of the Trump campaign, or the media conservative people right now. honestly much more so than Kamala. He's been more front and center, or he has more of a record to scrutinize. Kamala, maybe this is an advantage she has, that I really don't know what she thinks or what policies she wants to advance. I don't know what kind of ideology she has. She's not making that clear. She has to share in the Biden policies. She's been part of the Biden administration for 4 years, but they feel more like Biden's policies than hers. Now, I think she's certainly responsible for them and on the hook for them, but maybe it feels like less that there's a record to go over with her. We have to go back to her, Senate record, which was extremely progressive, extremely to the left, in my view. Whereas Tim Walz, by contrast, has been the governor, the chief executive of a state for a period of time. We can see much more directly which policies he supported that include all the things I went over during COVID, the mandates, the lockdowns, the snitch hotline for people. Actually, I recently saw an interview on Fox with maybe we can do a segment on this later, with a woman who was I believe fined and maybe even jailed under the COVID policies in Minnesota for having violated the social distancing rules. That was not a common occurrence, but it did happen. So that's the kind of thing that I expect conservatives, and rightly so, to make a big deal out of.
Yeah, I think Tim Walz and Kamala Harris are going to have to run on bread and butter issues. They're going to have to run on expanding Medicare. They're going to have to run on making the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes when they're contributing to Social Security and retirement. That's a huge reason Social Security is in threat of being insolvent. Of course, that would never happen. We've had many chairmen of the Fed say that it's actually not possible to default on the money going towards Social Security, and we would just allocate the dollars to the account. And the real constraint to that would be whether or not there's goods and services for the people receiving Social Security to purchase. And we're not at a place where we believe that will happen. But if the wealthy had been paying their fair share into Social Security, it wouldn't be in threat. We wouldn't have people on the right.
Their fair share? Wealthy people are paying millions
paying
of dollars.
Paying the same margin that working class people do.
They pay more money
pay
as a real
margin.
amount, but they pay more actual money.
That doesn't matter. They pay a lower margin. They should pay the same margin as the working class of America. She also proposed a cap on rent increases. All of these policies I've listed have a 53% or above polling average among people
rent control
who are likely voters.
Rent control
a cap on
leads
rent
to
increases. That's different
shortages.
from rent control.
Yeah, that would be the most dramatically bad thing we could do to alleviate our housing crisis, would be to start putting caps or controls on what people are allowed to pay for. We need
But that's
we want
not what
more
it is.
availability. Okay, go ahead.
It's the rent cap is you can't raise rent 5% or more over 2 years for all corporate landlords. So these are only applying to people who have 50 or more units.
Yeah, that's how we'll get housing shortage. Look, I do hope they run on these utterly failed, inane, left-wing, progressive economic ideas that will impoverish our country if implemented. Tim Walz, you're right, has a long track record of supporting those, and I hope attention is called to them.
Yeah, they're insanely popular. They will win votes. I think it's a big issue that by global standards, the United States is so far to the right that Kamala Harris is running on immigration policies that are very far to the right. Her not supporting Medicare for all makes her a right-wing candidate by any other modern country's standards.
What do you mean she doesn't support it? She voted for it when she was a senator.
No, she didn't.
Didn't she?
No. She is against Medicare for all.
I believe
said
she was
we're not
for it.
running for.
You're right. Maybe she's not. This is my confusion about her. I don't know if she supports it or not. Right. Now she said no, but when she was in the Senate, she supported it.
I
pretty
know
sure she
that
did.
she went back and forth on her presidential campaign in 2020 as to whether or not she supported it. It would be rich if she voted for it in the Senate, but then didn't run on it as president. Mm-hmm. And I think her coming out and saying we're not going to push for Medicare for all is ridiculous. It's one of the most popular common sense policies. We're paying more for health care than anywhere else in the world in the United States. And she's just like, nope, not going to run on that. So the Democrats and Republicans are very far to the right by global standards, and even though, even her running on these top 5 progressive policies that are popular, we would still be to the right by standards of modern Western nations around the world.
Right. I think conservatives say we're to the right, which is why we're a much more wealthy, successful, affluent country than places that create crippling regulations on businesses and welfare states so robust that people don't want to work or innovate, and that's why we're why we have more access to material wealth, not just for the wealthy, but for everyone.
I think anyone can look at a map and see why we have material wealth. We have a much bigger nation with much more natural resources than other countries.
Yeah, that's part of it.
That's
sure.
what makes us a wealthy country.
And also that we have, I mean, there's no tech, we talked about this yesterday, there's no tech sector in Europe because they want to regulate tech to death. We allow people to come here and to work and build things, and we tax them reasonably, so they have to pay back something, so that we create some standard of protections for people who are not well off, and that's the system most Americans want. They want one where people don't just get handouts, they don't just get the government taking care of them, but there's some reasonable protections, and then people have to, create something for themselves and find their place in the economy, and it seems to work pretty well.
I think working people who are now paid less and have less purchasing power with their dollars than they did in 1968 by 34% are seeing that it's not working for them. And I think that's why Kamala Harris and Walz are popular.
We'll see if they're popular. All right, more Rising right after this.